I just finished episode 7 of Dandadan and I think it's fucking amazing. So let's cover what's happened so far in the show. If you don't already know, Dandadan is about two high school students, Momo Ayase and Ken Takakura, better known as Okurun. Momo believes in ghosts, Okurun believes in aliens, and they don't believe in what each other believes in. So they challenge each other to go to respective places of what they don't believe in. So Okurun goes to a haunted tunnel, Momo goes to a supposed alien hotspot, and they both encounter what they did not expect to encounter. Okurun gets taken over by a ghost, and Momo gets abducted by aliens. And it's a little weird, but we'll get to that later. So that pretty much covers episode 1. And I think episode 1 was a super good pilot episode. It blends sci-fi and paranormal phenomenons really well. And that kind of does set up the rest of the show, even though currently the show's leaning more towards the paranormal side than the sci-fi side. I do think it's going to come back around to the sci-fi side. There is a pretty negative thing that happens in episode 1, but I'm going to get around to that later. Let's not be negative yet. Episode 2. They go back to Momo's house and they encounter what they suspect to be an alien, but it turns out to be a ghost or a yokai or spirit. They use way too many terms in the show. And they eventually defeat it with quite a bit of difficulty. This episode was a super good follow-up to such a strong pilot. So that was well done. And the highlight of that episode is Okurun's new transformation. That transformation is so fucking cool. In episode 3, we meet Momo's granny, who she talks about in the first episodes quite a lot. And my god, she is bad. Had me barking at my screen. In all seriousness, episode 3 is also a good episode. Momo kind of comes to grips with her new powers. She makes strides in learning them. And the episode also shows that Okurun is a major threat because Turbo Granny, who is the ghost that takes over him in episode 1, can leak out of his body and pretty much kill anyone. So that was scary. A very scary way to end that episode. In episode 4, Momo and Okurun head back to the tunnel where Turbo Granny is to defeat her, and it does not go to plan. They run into a shit ton of other creepy spirits, and they get a taste of Turbo Granny's real power, which is fucking devastating. Basically, the episode resolves with a super chaotic chase scene slash fight scene on a train, and they eventually outsmart her and defeat her. This was a super cool episode as well. It is probably the most action-packed episode so far, and it was really well done, and it got me hyped. And then episode 5 came along, and we went a completely different direction. I have a tie between my two favorite episodes, and episode 5 is one of them. The way they basically just made a short film, a short romance film within the episode was a masterpiece. Like, it went from this action-packed horror comedy, which is already a shit ton of genres, and they just threw in one of the most beautiful romance scenes ever. I was dumbfounded when I watched it. The way Momo and Okurun search for each other during recess, and they kind of just mirror each other for the whole recess. Like, he goes to the cafeteria because he thinks she'll be there. She goes to the store because she thinks he'll be there. And they go back and forth, and then they do the whole mirror thing, and the only dialogue is the dialogue in their heads. Just the way it was shot was so good. Kind of felt like something akin to a silent voice. So good. That was, until recently, that was one of the best episodes of an anime I've ever seen. Episode 6 was also really good, but it had the unfortunate position of being right after episode 5, which, as I just said, was amazing. And it also is kind of a setup episode for the most recent episode, episode 7, which is my other favorite episode. So it's rough for episode 6. It was still a good watch, and it was creepy as fuck. So no negative points there. It got towered on both sides by great episodes. Episode 7 is probably the best episode so far. It might be tied in my favorites, but I think objectively it is a better episode than episode 5. I literally can't even put it into words how good episode 7 was. But I did film a TikTok, which is my raw reaction immediately after finishing it, so I'll play that instead. I just finished episode 7 of Dandadan, and what the hell was that? I'm actually at a loss for words. I thought episode 5 was one of the best episodes of an anime I've ever seen. And episode 7 may have just topped that. What I liked about episode 5 was it had like this short film aspect to it. Like, it felt like someone just inserted a short film within the show, and I was like, man, that was done so well. This romantic, almost like a silent voice kind of film. And then the same thing just happened in episode 7, but better. The way that was done was so good. The last half of the episode, spoiler, with the yokai's backstory, fuck me. I'm not gonna reveal too much, but the way it was so dark, kind of like a perfect blue, but also so beautiful at times. It was done so well and it made me cry multiple times. There were so many scenes within that short little, I think it's like 10 minutes. It was like 3 or 4 scenes that made me cry. The chase scene as well, the POV. Fuck. What are they cooking? Okay, now we're going to break down the characters, pretty much the main characters. Starting with Momo. As I said earlier, she's a high school girl that believes in spirits and was reluctantly trained by her grandmother. She awakens her psychic powers after her really creepy encounter with the aliens, and those powers are super vital to the story. Honestly, I think she is my favorite character at the moment, especially with what just happened in season 7. Her reaction to the yokai's backstory, my god, that was a hard watch in a good way. The way she just collapsed and broke down, rough stuff. 10 out of 10. Ken, honestly, I find him annoying. He is like Deku from My Hero in his patheticness, and it's also that on steroids. But his ghost form, not his gross Turbo Granny form, his cool one that he can transform into at will, is one of the sickest characters ever made. He looks dope as hell, and he acts like Shikamaru in his lazy, everything's such a drag kind of way, but he does it even better than Shikamaru, like way more badass. Whenever he's on screen, I am locked in. Turbo Granny, she started as a very scary and creepy character, obviously. Also a little too obsessed with Okarun's balls for some reason. But now that she doesn't have powers, she's growing on me. She's so meek and mild, but she still has the mentality of someone evil. And she's also forced to help the kids even though she hates them, which leads to super funny moments. Yeah, she's growing on me. Seiko, which is Momo's granny, she would be one of the best characters if she wasn't weird. I don't know how to put it, but she's very weird about Okarun's balls as well. I don't know what's with the grannies in the show. And then Ira, she did not feel like she was going to be a main character at all. And then spoilers for episode 6 and 7, mainly 7. Her dying and then being brought back to life with the yokai's aura is a big indication that she's going to become a mainstay in the story. And I'm predicting a redemption arc from her, so do not let me down, Don Don. Now, all the things I like about this show. Number one, the genre blending. This might be one of the most, what do you classify this show as? It's got horror, paranormal stuff, sci-fi stuff, action, comedy, romance. So what the fuck do you classify it as? The second thing I really like about the show is the character dynamics, especially between Momo and Okarun. Their dynamics pretty cool because they have such opposing personalities. It leads to really good chemistry somehow, and their potential romance is super intriguing, and I hope that does come to fruition. The third thing I really like is the visual style of the show. The character designs are amazing. Momo's drippy as hell. Okarun's ghost is peak character design. I'm like, it's so peak, I would get a tattoo of it, but I don't have that emotional connection to the show yet. And all the creatures, like the ghosts, the yokais, the aliens, literally every single one of them is crazy unique. The ghost thing in episode 2, super unique. The aliens, super unique. The yokai from episode 7 and 6 and 7, super unique, and all looked really cool in their own way. Like, the character designer, or the person doing character designs in the show, is having a field day. And then on top of that, the use of color in this show is so unique. I've never seen anything like it in a show before. Specifically the way they shade things and alter the backgrounds depending on the scenario. Like, we saw it in the chase scene. If I remember correctly, everything went kind of red. Then with the ghost in episode 2, the show just became black and white, and then Okarun's form added touches of red, like splashes and red lights and shit. And then in episode 7, the yokai gave off this super vibrant pink hue over the entire episode. And then as soon as she was defeated, everything went back to normal. They're cooking with this color. And then on top of that, in episode 7, after the mother gets stabbed and the child gets kidnapped, and she runs out of the apartment after waking up, that blurry chase scene before she dies, fucking insane. I could make an entire video just on the visuals of the show. The fourth thing I really like is how engaging the storytelling is. Each episode feels like it has a purpose, and every single episode that's come out so far there isn't a single moment where I felt like there's a dip in momentum, except for the scene in episode 5 with them looking for each other. That did feel kind of random, but it was also such a masterpiece that I don't hate it. It didn't feel like a lull moment. And I know you shouldn't feel like there's a dip in momentum in a seasonal anime because there's only 12 to 24 episodes, so everything has to be concise, but there isn't, so positive. And then the fifth thing that I really like is the creative powers and abilities. Now, the powers aren't groundbreaking in any way, but the way they are done is super creative. They're used in a creative and unconventional way. What I mean by that is you can tell, and you're pretty much told, that both Momo and Okurun don't know how to use their powers that well, like at all. So when they are fighting or using their abilities, you can clearly tell they're just winging it, and it's done in a way that feels new. I don't know. Do you get that feeling too? Like the headbutt on the yokai. That was cool. And then lastly, I think it's the sixth thing that I really like. It's the fucking opening. I am a serial opening skipper, and I have not skipped this once. Now the negatives. Well, the negative. One big negative. I only have one negative point about the show. And hopefully you have guessed what it is already, because it's a huge talking point. I don't know how to word this without getting in trouble with YouTube, but the whole show has a weird obsession with the main character's genitals. Both characters. Characters who are super young and in school. The show literally revolves around Okurun's balls and shaft. Like, that's fucking odd considering he's so young. It is done in a funny way, so it's not as bad as it could be, but it is still really weird. What's worse for me is the upskirt shots of Momo. Why? For who? Especially the scene in episode 1 that I referred to earlier with the aliens and her being strapped to the table. That's so fucked and so unnecessary. I was so close when that happened to just dropping the show, but I didn't because everything else was really cool. So I was going to give it a chance. And luckily they have kind of slowed down with that. But the fact that it's there in the first place is so weird. And then on top of that, there was the whole thing that happened with one of the animators uploading that picture of her to Twitter. I'm obviously not going to include the picture here because it was really gross, but I'm sure you can find it if you want to see what I'm talking about. Fucked up behavior. And I think it's the only thing stopping me from calling this the show of the year. It feels kind of shit to end on a negative note like that. But morally, I did want to draw importance to how fucked up that kind of stuff is in the show. And other than that, the show is so perfect. I don't use that word often for a show. It's perfect besides that. And it's so shit that that ruins the whole package that is Dandadan. Yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe, and I'll see you next week.